Life is a constant oscillation between the yearning to have and the boredom of possessing. This phrase, attributed to Arthur Schopenhauer, is often called the saddest in all of philosophy. But do we truly understand its deeper meaning? Schopenhauer, known as the father of pessimism, saw existence as an endless cycle of desire and dissatisfaction. When we want something, we suffer from its absence. When we finally obtain it, we soon grow tired of it and seek a new goal. This dynamic creates an eternal restlessness, preventing us from achieving lasting and complete satisfaction. To understand this perspective, we must return to the context in which Schopenhauer lived. In the 19th century, Germany was the great cultural and intellectual center of the Western world, home to philosophers such as Kant and Hegel. The dominant philosophical movement at the time, German idealism, argued that reality is shaped by human consciousness. In other words, the world around us does not exist in absolute terms, but rather according to our interpretation. Schopenhauer, however, viewed this perspective with skepticism. To him, reality was not an optimistic mental construct, but a continuous flow of suffering. And it is from this viewpoint that we can begin to understand the sadness behind his famous phrase. The main philosophical movement of the time was German idealism, which claimed that reality did not exist objectively, but was filtered through human consciousness. Kant, for example, argued that we would never know the world as it truly is, only as it appears to us. This meant that everything we perceive, colors, shapes, sounds, is merely an interpretation of our minds. To illustrate this idea, imagine two people looking at the same painting. One might see beauty and depth, while the other sees only meaningless strokes. This happens because our perception of the world is not neutral. It is shaped by our experience and subjectivity. Schopenhauer disagreed with this idealist view. To him, life was not merely a matter of interpretation, but a concrete reality of suffering. Pain was not a perceptual issue, but an essential characteristic of existence. Influenced by Eastern philosophical traditions and the social turbulence of his time, he developed a philosophy marked by pessimism, opposing the rationalist optimism and the belief that the mind could shape reality in its favor. Immanuel Kant was one of the greatest influences on Schopenhauer's thinking, especially his theory of knowledge. Kant argued that we do not know reality as it truly is, only as it appears to us. According to him, everything we perceive passes through mental filters, our categories of understanding, which means we never have access to the thing in itself, the objective reality. To understand this, imagine you are wearing tinted glasses all the time. Everything you see will be influenced by the color of the lenses, but you will never know how things truly are without this filter. Similarly, Kant claimed that the world as we perceive it is always a construction of our minds. Schopenhauer agreed with this idea, but took the discussion to another level. He argued that although objective reality is inaccessible, there is one fundamental aspect of existence that we can know directly: the will. To him, the will is not merely a fleeting desire, but the primary force that drives all life. Unlike reason, which can be shaped, the will is irrational, blind, and insatiable. And it is precisely this relentless nature of desire that traps us in the eternal cycle between the yearning to have and the boredom of possessing. For Schopenhauer, suffering was not just an aspect of human existence, but its fundamental essence. While many philosophers sought to understand life through a rational or moral lens, he believed that reality was governed by a deeper, inescapable principle: the will. According to him, the will is an irrational impulse that constantly drives us, never allowing rest or lasting satisfaction. We desire something, struggle to attain it, and when we finally succeed, the joy is short-lived before we are consumed by a new desire or by boredom. This cycle repeats indefinitely, making suffering the rule and happiness a brief exception. To illustrate this, imagine someone who spends years dreaming of owning their ideal car. When they finally buy it, they experience a momentary euphoria, but soon grow accustomed to having it and begin to desire something new, perhaps a house, a trip, or another status symbol. This mechanism repeats itself in all areas of life, turning existence into an endless pursuit with no ultimate reward. Schopenhauer believed that this relentless dissatisfaction proved that suffering was not an accident of life, but its natural condition. The world was not a place of harmony, occasionally interrupted by moments of pain. Rather, it was a stage of constant suffering, relieved only by rare and fleeting instances of pleasure. To him, recognizing this truth was the first step toward a more honest view of reality. This process applies to all aspects of life. In the professional sphere, someone might strive for years to land their dream job, only to realize that over time, the routine becomes monotonous and the need for a new goal emerges. In relationships, there is the initial excitement of romantic love, but as time passes, passion fades and the search for new experiences arises. Schopenhauer saw this cycle as a reflection of the will's irrational nature. It is never satisfied, never ceases, and keeps us trapped in an endless pursuit. To him, understanding this dynamic is not a reason for despair, but an invitation to reflection. Are we truly living, or are we merely being carried along by a mechanism that will never allow us to experience true fulfillment? Schopenhauer's pessimistic worldview did not emerge solely from philosophical reflections, but was also shaped by his personal life experiences. Born in 1788, he grew up in a troubled family environment. His father, a strict and temperamental merchant, had high expectations for his son, hoping he would pursue a career in business. However, his father's sudden death, possibly a suicide, deeply affected the young Schopenhauer and steered him away from that path. His relationship with his mother was equally problematic. After becoming a widow, Johanna Schopenhauer established herself as a popular writer and maintained a vibrant social circle, something the philosopher despised. Their frequent conflicts eventually led to a complete estrangement. This familial isolation contributed to his pessimism and his bitter outlook on human relationships. Moreover, his travels across Europe reinforced his belief that suffering was the fundamental condition of existence. During his journeys, he witnessed the devastating consequences of the Napoleonic Wars, misery, hunger, and destruction everywhere. These observations solidified his conviction that life is inherently tragic. Thus, his philosophy was not merely an abstract theory, but a reflection of a life marked by loss, conflict, and disillusionment. Decades later, Albert Camus would explore a theme similar to Schopenhauer's, but from a different perspective. To Camus, life indeed lacks an objective meaning, and the universe is indifferent to our existence. However, rather than succumbing to pessimism, he proposed a response: rebellion against the absurd. Camus argued that even without intrinsic purpose, life can still hold value. We are free to create our own meaning through art, knowledge, human relationships, or simply through the experience of being alive. He rejected both resignation to suffering and escape through religion or absolute ideologies. While Schopenhauer saw suffering as inescapable, Camus viewed the freedom to define one's own destiny as the only genuine response. Instead of yielding to despair, he suggested embracing life, even in its apparent lack of meaning. Schopenhauer exposed the constant oscillation between desire and boredom, emphasizing suffering as the essence of existence. His pessimistic outlook, rooted in both philosophy and personal experience, highlights humanity's restless struggle with perpetual dissatisfaction. Camus, on the other hand, reminds us that despite life's absurdity, we are free to create our own meaning. In the end, it is up to each individual to decide how to face this reality, whether to succumb to pessimism or to find purpose in the journey. Perhaps by understanding this dynamic, we can accept life as it is, and who knows, live it more consciously.